Come on.
All right, we are live.
Here we are.
Hello, everyone. I am so sad that this is the last live module. It has been such, well, luckily this has all been recorded and you guys can watch it as often as you want. It has been just such a wonderful, just so joyous, and I've learned so much, and I appreciate so much going above and beyond, doing the extra modules to get everyone's questions answered, and that is just so kind of you. And we've got one more big session in store where Dr. Frank is going to answer all the questions that we didn't get to the first 6 or 8 modules. And so in order for him and I to focus on these questions, and there's almost 30 of them, after I say hello to all of you, like Evelyn from Palm Desert, I hope you'll come to the Veg Fest and all the events that we have, and Karen and Rosie and Marjorie and Connie from New York. I am going to close the chat so that I can ask these questions. And if there is any time at the end, which there probably won't be, I will open the chat again where you can ask questions. And please keep in mind that Dr. Frank is not your doctor, so he legally cannot give you consultations, but he will answer the questions as broad and as general as he can. So without further ado, we start our final Q&A. So Dr. Sabatino, I listened to all the lectures and Q&As so far, but I don't think I heard you answer this one. I eat the way you and Chef AJ recommended and have for the last year, but my cravings specifically for chocolate has still not subsided. I'm not sure if I'm craving the chocolate or the sugar that I used to indulge in a year ago. Can you please talk about the addictive nature of chocolate and all of the reasons to avoid it?
Well, chocolate is, again, depending on what kind of chocolate you have, chocolate has not only chocolate with all the theobromine and caffeine and some of these things that create their own little addictive quality, but it can have a sweetener, it can have sugar, because most of the time chocolate is so bitter that most people would not eat it in its natural state very much. And that would be one of the things I would urge you when you want it, to get it as raw and unsweetened as you can, because I'll guarantee you that that will start to break your desire for eating large amounts of it. There's always been this discussion that sometimes women during their menstrual cycles have changes in magnesium that can drive the desire for chocolate. But again, chocolate's one of those things that not only with substance, but the nature of it drives a certain kind of craving and attachment. And some of that is not even on a food level, some of it is even on an emotional level. So my advice would be cut it back, work with the foods we're talking about, get involved with a lot of the fruits for sweetener. We talked about using fruit for sweet and for dessert, and then get, again, smaller amounts, very dark, very unsweetened chocolate when you want it, and allow yourself to see if that breaks that pattern a little bit.
Great. I found that like when I quit chocolate, eating a lot of bananas for some reason helped. Maybe it was the magnesium. I don't know. And eating a lot of greens. Eating a lot of greens, I think, is the answer for everything.
Well, it stabilizes everything in the blood. That is a truth to that. So if you're having a broad base of good fruits and a lot of greens, a lot of times all those cravings drop out.
Thank you. This is a question from an actual airplane pilot. And she said, about 6 months ago, I gave up drinking coffee with an exception for my job as an airplane pilot. I find that I often need a cup of black coffee, either for a late night or early morning takeoff or landing for mental alertness. Is this okay, or is there an alternative?
Well, look, in an isolated way, we're not going to make a big deal about it. And frankly, I'd rather have you alert in the cockpit than not. Especially if I was in the plane, I'd bring you the cup of coffee, probably. But again, you could go with something. We've talked about this, again, because it does have some antioxidant quality that's a little better. You can possibly work with a good quality green tea, and it will have L-theanine. It kind of tempers the caffeine effect. And if you find you really need that little stimulation when you're in that flight mode, maybe green tea would be a better way to go.
Great. Here's a question from Colleen. I take a daily thyroid hormone due to surgically induced hypothyroidism. My recent TSH was 0.14, so my endocrinologist lowered my dose from 125 micrograms to 112 micrograms daily. Now that I am drinking far less coffee, is it true that coffee can affect an absorption of the thyroid hormone?
To some degree, but it's more of that impact on stimulation and depression. And I find the more coffee you drink, the more suppression of thyroid is, and then you're taking higher dosages of it too. So on many levels, the fact that you get rid of the caffeine while you're dealing with this thyroid situation is really, really important, I think.
Great. All right. Let me find the questions. Okay. From Charlotte. I often have my insulin level tested when I do a blood test. At one point I was at 26, but now I think it's about 12. What's an optimal level so as not to have insulin resistance?
Well, I mean, that based on the lab. The lab will give you a range of normal. You just need to be in it. And
Okay.
the bottom line is, generally speaking, if you're not getting a lot of craving for things in between meals, especially sweets, if you're feeling more stable, if your weight is relatively under control and stable, all of those things, and you're eating, again, if you're eating a very low fat and no saturated fat, so the animal saturated fat has to be out, and you're eating the food we're recommending, it's just going to stabilize insulin very comfortably. So that's all you really need to focus on.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Sabatino, for your expertise. 2 years I embarked on this plant-based lifestyle change, and coincidentally, my husband and I joined an Alzheimer vascular study at Emory University in Atlanta. We are almost 60, and the study looks for markers that may indicate the onset of Alzheimer's. There are a battery of scans, MRIs, spinal taps, and memory tests to look for these markers. My husband's memory test was borderline, meaning they were watching to see if he was experiencing any of the markers. Upon returning 2 years later yesterday, the doctor couldn't believe how much both of our memories had improved. He had a perfect score on one of the tests, and the doctors wonder if he had memorized any of the material 2 years ago in practice, which of course we had not. As I explained to the doctor, we had changed to a plant-based diet, which improved our overall health. He did not accept that explanation, but I know it's true. So thanks again. It's just a comment that was.
Because it's a mistake, because we now know that two of the big things involved even with Alzheimer's is actually atherosclerotic plaques, the vascular plaques from high animal fat, and also insulin resistance. When insulin resistance goes up, there's an increased outcome of Alzheimer's, and also an increase in homocysteine from the methionine in meat and dairy products. So the truth of the matter is, whether the doctor wanted to deal with it or not, the dietary change you made remarkably can affect the pathology of Alzheimer's.
Great. Mark says, I travel a lot, both internationally and domestic. Oftentimes I find myself grabbing the easiest fastest food, which are bananas and apples, and will eat those all day. How detrimental is this way of eating, because I am missing out on veggies and greens? Please note I realize this isn't ideal. However, I'm unable to take fresh produce on international trips and do not have a place to prepare foods. For instance, I just returned from a 12-day stint in the middle of the Dubai desert. There is no Whole Foods or even an outlet for my Instant Pot. I am offered RMEs, dried military meals, but figure a day of bananas is better.
I would say that that's probably true. The other thing that you can do is you can just do a handful of things like walnuts. Nuts travel real well. I mean, you can do that. Sometimes you can take a little bit of a dry fruit and reconstitute it just with water, and that will also give you a little bit of a fruit component. So I understand. I mean, this is dealing with very serious, extreme situations, but I think that your strategy is good. And I think if you add a few of these non-perishable things, like a few nuts, some dried fruit that travel well that you can just reconstitute with a little bit of water, you can kind of expand the repertoire a little bit until you get to a place where you can, have a decent meal with greens and so on.
You can get dehydrated greens. I mean, there's a company that sells every vegetable there is dehydrated online.
And for him, it may be necessary even to just purchase a dehydrator and do it yourself. So you always got a stock of your own dehydrated veggies and things. And that works really. People do that with camping trips. They do it in many different ways. This may be a case where that would really work for him.
Yep. So Connie says, actually, she said that you would give us a graphic of exercises, but Connie, he actually did during one of the modules get up and show everything. So he's not going to give the graphic, because remember, you got up and demonstrated all the exercises you were talking about.
Do I need to do it again?
No, you don't need to do it again, but I'm just mentioning to Connie that it's there. I just don't know exactly what module it is. So this is a question from Anonymous. Thank you, Dr. Frank, for your valuable info. I have suffered from bulimia for 40 years. Can these strongly ingrained habits and addictions be reversed? I understand all of what you say and teach. I have been at this quest for health a long time. I'm not the sort to give up. However, my circumstances do not allow me to visit a facility for monitoring. I do believe in the natural approach. No pills for me. However, I have not been able to get past the withdrawal physical symptoms that happen when my body wants to binge. It seems to just take over. I feel helpless and completely out of control. I don't want to sound the victim as I am a take charge person inside. Is there any advice for someone in my situation? I will continue to try. Also, I am that one you speak of that does not consider, or should I say hasn't, changed my habits even when my life has been in balance. Sometimes only severe pain stops me from binging and purging. My body can't take much more as I've aged and I'm now menopausal. I listen to all the free webinars I can, and it's ridiculous to say that one binge alone could cost me up to $50. I tell I'm in deep, but I know I'm in deep. Do I still have hope? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I never take away hope, but this is not a food issue only. I mean, this is really something on a much deeper issue of the relationship with food. The truth of the matter is most of the people in fasting centers and clinics do not fast people with eating disorders, believe it or not, because you're almost playing into the strategies and things that have always been part of the way you've dealt with things. The control issues with bulimia, they center around exerting some control in your life. And so these control issues, these psychological issues, I believe, to be honest with you, need to be processed in a different way, in a deeper way. And there's where some psychological help and other things really would be of extreme value, and processing that in ways that touch on things much deeper than just food choice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, our friend Dr. Doug Lyle would, I'm sure, be happy to talk to the individual if they would like to.
Doug would be the perfect person to really have that conversation with. I agree with that.
Great. Mel says, is it possible to get through peri, pre, and post-menopause without HRT? I am 47, have not yet begun the process, but I'm getting anxiety hearing from my friends and doctors that I must get on HRT, which they tell me is also a miserable experience. I eat exclusively whole plants with no overt fats, which has helped me with my periods. Prior, while eating the SAD diet, I had debilitating cycles, but this way of eating has taken care of that. I was hoping that by continuing this diet, I would not need HRT.
And there's a good chance that you won't. Understand this, the pattern for women going through perimenopause into menopause changes so dramatically woman to woman. There are people that go through perimenopause and enter menopause never knowing that it even happened. There are other women who go to hell and back. So it is such a diversity. And understand that the shift or the symptoms that happen for most women, whether that has to do with hot flashes, which I like to call power surges, actually, depression, sleep disturbance. These are neurological things that some people have linked with the drop in estrogen. Estrogen has a neuroprotective effect in the nervous system and the brain. But if you're going to have those reactions, it usually happens when you go from the very high levels of your normal menstrual cycle to the low drop in menopause. That drop, it's not just that estrogen is dropping, but the precipitous nature of that drop can also trigger those symptoms. So if you're living on a plant-based approach, you don't jack up those hormonal levels quite as much. So when you go into perimenopause, the drop isn't usually as severe and the symptoms are typically less. So by eating the way we're recommending with activity and the things we've talked about, you may find that it's not as horrific as you're anticipating that it will be. And I will tell you that even whatever symptoms come, many of them on this lifestyle will last for a short period of time, and then they will dissolve when you hit the steady state of menopause. So it's very tricky. It's different in many women, but it has to do with not only the drop in estrogen or the change, but the extent of the change. And in many countries where women run lower levels of estrogen because they're not eating the animal and dairy products that they do, like countries like ours, when they go into perimenopause, the drop is smaller and they don't have the symptoms nearly as much.
Yeah, I've heard that. And I've heard that girls that don't get their period till like 17 and 18, which is when they would get it if they weren't eating this diet, do a lot better than those that are getting it at 8, 9, and 10.
It's true.
Yeah. which is because of
the ones that have it at 8, 9, and 10, they're running very high estrogen levels much longer in their lives. And so when they get into that perimenopausal place and it begins to drop, it's a precipitous drop, and the body responds to that pattern of drop, not just the amount, not just the fact that it's dropping.
And that's because of all the dairy and
dairy and meat. Remember, when you're eating animal products, you've got this enzyme aromatase that comes in and it converts testosterone to estrogen. So you get this estrogen effect that gets exaggerated by meat and dairy products.
Yep. And she said that prior her periods were erratic, horrible cramping, couldn't stand, edema in their joints, causing fluid, heavy flow. They wanted to prescribe her opiates, which she never took. But I've seen so many people get better with this way of eating.
There's no question.
Absolutely.
Easier menstrual cycles, easier perimenopausal shifts, all of that happens.
Absolutely. Mark says that when I ate the standard American diet, I required about 10 hours of sleep and was still always ready for a nap. Since adopting a plant-exclusive diet, I seem to require about 5 hours sleep. I go to sleep about 9 p.m. and I wake up about 2 a.m. I am just awake. I do not turn on the TV, check my phone, play on my tablet. I just lie there until it is time for me to get up between 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. I am not stressed or worrying about anything. I am fine and wide awake during the day. Am I getting too little sleep? I just use the time to think. I have tried going to bed later, but I still wake up 5 hours later.
Well, 5 hours sounds like a little too little. I like it at least 6. But the fact of the matter is energy levels are good during the day. This is not uncommon when you're eating the way we recommend. You have much more energy. You're not spending as much energy processing the toxicity of the diet that most people are eating. And you're not being loaded down with, high fat, high sugar, stuff that's really destabilizing on a hormonal and physiological level. So yeah, you can have a great deal more energy. And it sounds to me like you're doing okay. If it got to the point where you're starting to flag in the day and you're getting weak and not able to focus, then I would say you may want to consider trying to get a little bit more rest. But right now, it sounds like it's okay.
Right. I always wonder how much exercise the people that don't sleep well are getting.
We need to emphasize that because that's a very big piece. The more physically active you are in the day, the sleeping pattern is a little bit better established at night. The transmitters are more activated for sleep later, and that includes even getting a little sunlight in the day. Your body needs that light orientation in the day to appreciate the dark orientation at night. We've talked about this diurnal pattern. So being physical, getting a little daylight and sunlight, and then programming that more routinely will affect and benefit the sleep cycle.
Well, as luck would have it, Mark submitted another question about exercise.
Okay,
how do I know if I'm exercising too much? I don't want to overstress my body. I am healthy, fit, and on an exclusive whole plant diet. I have an extremely sedentary job with little ability for any movement during the long 12-hour workday. I do weight training for an hour in the morning and cardio for 30 to 60 minutes at night. I love doing both as they make me feel better physically and mentally. Some say this is too much, but if I skip it, I feel stiff and mentally foggy. I do quite a variety consisting of light or heavy weights, steady state, or HIIT cardio, spinning, boot camp, metabolic weight training. Boy, this guy's like perfect if he's...
Mark, you're an outlier. Everything you're doing is, it's working for you. So my feeling is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I would look at, again, what's your weight pattern? How's your energy? Are you feeling well? Are you able to do what you need to do in your day? It sounds to me like you are. So bless you. Some bodies like to move more. I like to move more. I get a little frustrated when I can't. My schedule gets out of hand. You're someone who's used to being physical. I would go with that. But the big issue with activity is that you have to allow some recovery time. So just make sure you're allowing the body to recover with your rest. And if you find yourself getting sore or you're getting weak, that would give you some indication that you're not recovering as much. But as for what you've described, it sounds like you're okay. So bless you.
Yeah, great. Mary asks, is napping during the day helpful for getting sufficient sleep? I sleep fitfully at night, but cannot fall back to sleep, so I often take a nap during the day.
I think it's a great strategy. You'll notice the rest of the world takes siestas and naps, and I think it's civilized to do it, and I think you've made it work as a strategy. What I would do is I wouldn't make it a very extended period. I think you'll find that even in the space of 20, 30 minutes to an hour at the most, because that may be one of the things that programs your inability to sleep later. But I definitely would take some rest time during your day to give yourself a little refresher. And I would work a little bit more with some of the techniques we've talked about in terms of physical activity, that breathing meditation work in the day. We talked about doing some breath work at night, slow, deep breathing to release that monkey mind, because sometimes there's anxiety and we're carrying the stress of the day to bed with us. So I would work with those pieces, but to answer your question, the nap is civilized. Enjoy it.
Great. One of my favorite quotes is, how beautiful it is to do nothing and then rest afterwards. I have a sign that says that.
That's pretty cool, yes.
Yeah, I never had a chance to do nothing, but I've always wanted to know what that's like. Lisa asks, is there any problem with teeth eating this way? Do they get weaker? I've read something to that order, but it could just be people who ask you where you get your protein. Ha ha.
There's no reason why the teeth should weaken on a broad-based diet that we're recommending, because it's providing all the adequate nutrients and then some. I would think that on a typical diet where you're getting less micronutrients and things of that nature, that would be a bigger problem. So bone health, teeth health are all pretty well benefited and supported by the broad-based, plant-based, plant-exclusive diet that we're recommending. I don't see any problem with that.
Nice. Okay, and Lisa also says she loves this class. Thank you both. Down 14 pounds in 8 weeks. Excellent. Only a couple more, but very happy now. But my hair is a little dry. Do I add a little avocado or nut to help that? I just get better.
The dryness could be part of even moving into perimenopausal, menopausal time. There is a little bit of a drying effect that can occur. But again, I would make sure that there's enough hydration, for sure, with water, for sure. And I would also make sure that you're getting adequate omega-3s, too. You're getting the oils that we need, the essential oils. So again, we've talked about adding a little bit of flaxseed. We've talked about eating a small, ounce or so of walnuts and things of that nature in the overall program. So make sure you're getting a little bit of those plant oils, even in small amounts, can go a very long way. And make sure your body's hydrated. But it could be a function of age. It could be a function of some hormonal changes. And that is something we do see when estrogen levels do begin to decline sometimes.
Nice. Okay, this is from Anonymous. I'm a 51-year-old postmenopausal woman, 5'4" tall and 121 pounds. I started whole food plant-based eating about 2 months ago. Within a few weeks, my total cholesterol dropped from 242 to 141. Wow. Subsequently, I eliminated nuts, seeds, avocado. When a week of that, my total cholesterol dropped to less than 100. At the same time, I started experiencing signs of fertility, including increased cervical mucus. Is there any chance I could get pregnant? I have not menstruated in 2 years. Could this way of eating or the dramatic decrease in my total cholesterol affect my fertility?
Yeah, usually when the cholesterol level goes too low, the fertility is cut off, not increased. So I don't know how fertile you are. My feeling is if you haven't had a period for several years, unless there was some spotting in between, because sometimes, it's amazing how there can be just some little residual stuff that's still not done. I've had people that have been menopausal that fast and all of a sudden have a menstrual cycle and haven't had one in years. So the likelihood of you getting pregnant is small, but I can't tell you that it won't happen. So my personal feeling is that I would probably eat a little of those the foods with a little bit of oil. Cholesterol, remember, is not just a villain. Cholesterol is the foundation for all of the hormones in the human body, many of the steroid hormones, whether it's estrogen, all of the things like all the hormones of the adrenal system. So the bottom line is cholesterol is a very major part of that. And if it goes too low, it could involve, a depression of the hormonal and endocrine system. But my feeling is you'll know that by energy and everything else. So if your energy is high and your cholesterol level is lower, bless you, that's fine. But again, to answer your question, I have no idea how fertile you are with that. The likelihood is not. The likelihood is you probably had a little bit of a bleeding episode that went on. It doesn't mean that you actually ovulated and passed an egg, so we don't know that.
But if she does get pregnant, I'm going to suggest she names the child Lil Frankie.
No.
after
I
you.
have 5 of my own. Don't name any more with me. Yeah.
I'm kidding, of
I
course.
know, I know, I know.
Yeah. Debbie asks, sometimes after I have eaten a generous, low fat, whole food plant based meal, right afterwards, I want to eat more food. It doesn't seem related to whether I am satiated or not, but it seems more about an insulin trigger reaction. You spoke in your original interview with AJ about the insulin and hormone triggers. Could this be what I'm experiencing? Do others experience this? If so, is this a reason to pay attention to the amount of grains or balance between starchy vegetables, grains, and regular veggies?
Again, I would think that the foundation of the diet needs to be abundant in the greens, and then just eat adequate starchy vegetables. I would just eat potatoes and things until there is a satisfaction, and then you've got to kind of walk away from that a little bit, make sure you're hydrated, and there's an adjustment, and it's possible the hormonal system is still in a process of adjustment. Or there can be periods of the day based on stress and sleep where there may be fluctuations in that, and on those days or around those days, that shift in the way insulin is working and so on may be just enough to drive a little bit of that craving. If it's happening with every meal, I've got to look at the overall, habitual stuff related to food use. Because if you're eating an abundance of all of these veggies and you're having an abundance of the starchy vegetables, whether it's potatoes or quinoa or legumes and beans and so on, when you're full at that meal, that satiety should last a significant amount of time.
Okay. Lisa says, I've been 95% whole food plant-based with 0 meat for 5 years and 90% with some meat for 8 years before that. I've had daily headaches for the past 4 years. Will eating these foods in the module 100% make the headaches go away, or is there something I'm missing, not doing? I've had my teeth fixed. I went to a physical therapist. I tried medication, working on stress and tension and exercising. Maybe it's a food sensitivity.
Yeah, it could be food sensitivity, and that's very common actually. So it may be gut and food sensitivity related, and again, there could be something structural. I don't know. Sometimes even doing chiropractic care, doing some body work in that regard will change the pattern. But I would make it 100%. Look at 100% for a period of time. Get as rigorous as you can. You're getting all the dairy and meat and everything out, and again, then watch it over a period of time. And maybe for a short while, keep a little bit of a food journal in terms of when it shows up, what you've eaten before, what you've just had, and see if you can do a little elimination evaluation on your own. And there may be something sometimes when you're eating the same things over and over again, there can sometimes develop a little sensitivity to a particular item of food. So sometimes you may want to rotate those items a little bit, so you're not having them all the time, every meal. So, that's the way, if you came to me, I would probably look at it that way and maybe even do some form of food sensitivity profile. Though they're not 100% accurate, they may provide some insight that would be.
Remember, there was that lady that they wrote up in the medical journal at True North. She had a headache like for 8 years, and then she fasted twice for 42 days, and she's been headache free ever since.
Yeah, and that's very typical. I've had people with migraines for life, and then on fast and so on, it really does change it. So we know there's a neurological, we know there's a physiological program that is established around that. And so it may be that you need to do some period of fasting to really make a shift in that.
Yeah, great. Okay. Here we go. From Jane. You talked about the percentage of fat, carbs, and protein in a plant-based diet. What percentage of that should be raw food?
Yeah, we've alluded to this briefly. I would say of that, we're looking at probably, if you think about the fact that you're going to have some greens in the morning, you're going to have big salads at lunch, I'd probably still say that the diet is still going to be somewhere 80 to 90% raw, pretty much. I mean, you're having cooked food and you're having some fattier things in small amounts. So I don't want to give you an exact percentage because everybody finds their middle ground. There are days when I eat mostly all raw, to be honest, and then there's days when I'm having more cooked starches. I'd rather you have the flexibility than trying to create some static program that you think you need to follow, because I think you'll find yourself getting easier off track with that because it feels so regimented. So, for example, I may get up one morning and I want oatmeal and I've got to have it. Another morning I get up and I say, you know what, I just want a few pieces of fresh fruit. Another morning I get up and I say, you know what, I don't even want breakfast this morning. I'm going to eat a little bit later. And so I try to be flexible with what I'm feeling, what's going on. But when I do choose to eat, I'm only eating what we've been talking about. Do you understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a more viable and vital approach to food use, because we've been brought up to eat according to the clock. It's breakfast time, it's lunchtime. And the truth of the matter is, you may not be hungry at that particular time. And it makes more sense to be more in line with what the appetite is dictating to some degree, and then move around and dance around that a little bit.
So she's asking, is raw food good or even better if you maintain the same percentages?
Raw food is great, but look, I think people do really well, and that's why we advocate cooked starches. I mean, I see it more stable. I see the energy levels are able to be sustained. I think people, as a rule, I don't want to make it a rule, but I think when you diversify the diet and know that you can have some cooked and you can eat a lot of raw, you don't get locked into getting almost religious about the diet. Then it becomes all raw. And then what I find with raw diets is many times then you're starting to eat much higher fat content, because everything starts to become more nuts and avocados. And so I find that the stability of eating foods that have good satiety, like legumes and starchy potatoes and quinoa and grains and a lot of greens, and I think it just stabilizes everything so much better. I mean, that's just been my clinical observation over a long time, and even a personal observation in my own life.
Mm-hmm. Me too. I tried raw for a couple of years. I was always cold and I was always hungry. I'm a potato girl, sweet potatoes. As you know, because you've seen me eat.
I know, yes.
Jane also asks, I've eaten a whole food plant diet for years, yet developed lymphoma. So I'm considering what next steps are best. Have you personally ever worked with anyone to overcome lymphoma?
Yeah, lymphoma is one of those things, and this has even been published by the people out of True North. It's one of those cancers that actually responds very well to water-only fasting. And I think combining a fast over a period of weeks back in touch with the diet that we're talking about may be something that can be quite beneficial to you. And I would consider that, and I would consider looking at the case studies that have been done. And we have had the experience that lymphoma does respond fairly well to periods of fasting.
That's great. Elisa says, will you give examples of what to eat in a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner? You might have answered that, but people really love to know.
But I'll do it again. Like for me, I can go by me, and on a typical day, I'll get up and I like having fresh fruit in season. This is me. I like having because in the morning I like that feeling of hydrating. Sometimes I will have raw leafy greens with that, like romaine lettuce or something with that. And I do oftentimes have some what is a sprouted gluten-free oatmeal that we'll cook. It's lovely, and I'll have that with just fruit in it. I just put fruit with sweetener in it. There's no sweetener. I may want to put a little cinnamon if I want to get it really jazzed up. I may put a little pumpkin pie spice in it. But as a rule, I'm having a grain like that, some fruit and some green on a big day. On a small day, it may be fruit only. Lunch for me is always a huge, huge salad. And in that salad, it's a meal in itself, and I put everything in that salad. That salad will have potatoes in it. It will have beans in it. It will have every form of vegetable in it. I mean, it's a meal in itself. And I like having potatoes at lunchtime. I like that a lot with my salad. It works well for me. I have a little avocado with that. I may have a few walnuts with that. And then at dinner, I like having a variety of steamed greens. And I usually like 2 or 3 greens. And for me, that can be anything from broccoli, kale, cauliflower. It could be Brussels sprouts, spinach, mustard greens, collard greens, all of that. And then I'll usually have either a different kind of potato, or I'll have a grain, which could be a brown rice or a quinoa, and I'll usually have some legume with that. I like beans and things of that nature. So for me, that's kind of a typical day that works really well. If I want to get more festive, like Thanksgiving's coming up, we may get a little more festive with some dishes, but it's still going to be that basic tenor of those kinds of things.
You know, it's interesting, Dr. Frank, as I recently spoke at a conference, and the food was basically compliant, but the bowl that they had the salad in for all 200 participants was literally the size of the salad bowls that you give to each person for lunch at Balance for Life. You know, people just don't eat enough veggies. Yep, not at all.
Well, they still that deprivational head still lingers somewhere. They still have this feeling that I've got to still limit the quantity, you know, and we're really trying to emancipate that mentality, especially with greens and vegetables. That's not where it's at. It's about eating volumes of those foods.
Yep. Tracy says, I definitely suffer from reward deficiency syndrome. I find little joy in life. I have embraced your way of eating. What other personal work or tools should I be considering to treat my problem? My marriage is fine. My job is fine. I've been through counseling where I've learned tools to deal with anxiety.
Well, I'm wondering if that helped dealing with the anxiety, if it helped in terms of the reward deficiency. To be honest, when there's extreme reward deficiency and there's really still, I'm not hearing that she's got addictive behavior though. If there's really true reward deficiency, you're usually trying to self-medicate with some form of addiction, whether it's food, sex, drugs, you know, gambling, anything of that nature. I'm not hearing that that's part of what she's dealing with. So she may have just lost a little bit of the joie de vivre, a little bit of the enjoyment of life. It may not be a true physiological reward deficiency, but if it is, in the field of addiction, we actually do another form of a supplement program with certain amino acids that rebuild those transmitter systems. And that's in the more extreme form of reward deficiency and addiction. It doesn't change what we're recommending in food because we still wanted to go with this whole eating plan, but we may add a little bit of a supplementation program. I don't really want to go deeply into that because that's a clinical call and it needs to be monitored a certain way, but I will tell you that it involves 3 to 4 typical amino acids that are involved in the brain's ability to produce neurotransmitters. And that is sometimes what we will do when we're dealing with the real compulsive addictive behavior with reward deficiency.
Mm-hmm. Rena says, Dr. Sabatino, if I ate for lunch one thin egg pancake with chocolate, cream, and raspberries, hopefully this was in my experimental phase and is not happening now, I would lose by the next day roughly 1.6 pounds. If I eat a mixture of mashed potatoes, sweet potatoes, and purple carrot and feel very full afterwards, I will gain weight the next day, 1 pound. And I measured it when breakfast and dinner was more or less the same. So I noticed that many times that my body reacts more to the volume of food, losing weight when not being stuffed after a meal, even though the calorie density is much higher. Is there any logical explanation? Does that mean
finish it.
Does that mean you should eat low calorie density food, but it still needs to be in a smaller volume? You say that portion control becomes important with higher calorie density food. I just have to say something though, because we talk to Dr. Lyle in my group about this all the time. Nobody should be weighing themselves every day. You cannot gain a pound of fat in a day. You can't.
The bottom line is when there is so much fluctuation of water and things in the body day to day that it becomes unbelievably counterproductive. And I have this issue even at my place because we have the medical scale in the corner. And I tell people, look, you're coming in. I'm going to weigh you when you come in. I'm going to weigh you almost a week later. My best advice to you is don't get lost on the scale, because the things can fluctuate with a pound fluctuation is almost within such normal limits that it's really ridiculous because your life and psychology goes up and down with that pound on the scale. The key is just make sure you're eating that abundance of greens at those meals. We're going to keep emphasizing that. And those veggies. And then if you're having potatoes, have your potatoes and enjoy it. But I think what you'll find is that the pattern of weight loss, the body sees weight loss across time. You have to understand that. So for example, if you lose 3 pounds in a day and you don't lose another pound for the rest of the week, the body sees the fact that you lost 3 pounds that week. You understand? And that's where we have to separate our intellectual mind, which thinks that if I lost 3 pounds a day, I should be able to lose 3 pounds every day. That's not how the system sees it. So we need to lighten up. We need to go into not getting lost in scale numbers. We talked about this at the very beginning. Embrace the dietary pattern we're talking about and give your body a chance to adjust. And what you will find is that that weight regulation will occur across time exactly the way it has to.
Yep. Thank you. Kathy says, can you talk a little bit more about inflammation and the role of diet? I am 62, blessed with great health, and strive for clean eating, vegan, essentially follow SOS-free diet, but have struggled with a diagnosis of uveitis, chronic inflammation, in my left eye since the end of 2016.
Well, the inflammation in the eye may not be what we're talking about when we talk about systemic inflammation. I don't know what's going on in that eye. There could be some local trauma damage in the eye that is locking that in that particular location. Generally speaking, the dietary pattern we're talking about is the most significant anti-inflammatory diet on the planet because it's extremely alkaline. It does not provide any metabolic acidosis. It provides a much broader base of anti-inflammatory prostaglandins from the omega-3 foods of plants, nuts, seeds, and the like. It does not enhance the prostaglandins from animal and dairy, which promote inflammation. So overall, it doesn't provide the processed fats and oils that are transformed that can also stimulate and provoke inflammation. It keeps the bowel healthy, so you're not getting bowel inflammatory change. So on every level, this eating plan and lifestyle is anti-inflammatory. Now, if you're dealing with a lot of stress, that will increase inflammation. If you have sleep deficiency, it will promote inflammatory outcome. So the key is, how are you balancing those food choices with the other pieces that we've talked about? But as a rule, no other eating plan on planet Earth.
Yep. You froze for just a brief second there, but you came back. Margot, yeah, but you're good. Margot says, I recently went on blood pressure medication, and you mentioned that doctors would usually give you a potassium supplement too. Mine didn't, and I've been just trying to eat bananas and potatoes to get my supply of potassium in. Today I read that you should not eat foods rich in potassium while on BP medication, so it is confusing. What is the right answer? My goal is to get my BP down naturally through a whole food plant-based SOS-free eating plan, but I probably have about 20 to 30 pounds to lose first.
No, you misunderstood me in a way. Usually, if you're giving a diuretic medication to lower high blood pressure, is when the potassium supplement was given, because there would be more urinary loss of potassium than sodium, is what we said. Not all blood pressure meds are diuretic, and the bottom line is he may have given you some other form of a calcium channel blocker or a beta blocker or something else that does not require a potassium supplement, and that's the way it sounds. So my advice is, don't worry about supplementing with potassium. Just embrace the eating plan with activity and the things we've talked about, and your body will naturally give yourself a chance to lower the need for that blood pressure medication, as blood pressure will drop as your weight comes down too. Remember, weight is going to be one of the leading factors for elevating blood pressure. There's much more work the heart has to do, and pressure is raised in the process. So just embrace what we're doing. Don't worry about potassium supplementation. Just eat the broad base of plants. Enough potassium is coming in. You don't have to exaggerate the mineral content, but you misunderstood me. That was only if you were on a diuretic medication for high blood pressure.
Okay. Evelyn says, I have psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis. I've been whole food plant-based for 4 years, SOFAs and gluten-free for 4 months. My range of motion is clearly better. The arthritis has improved. Flare-ups are less often, but my joints are still swollen and tender. I wasn't able to pick up a cup without using 2 hands, and now I can, so at least my strength has improved. I expected to see my skin clear up. The skin started to improve, and I was hopeful, but now it's almost worse than ever, and I'm not sure why. Am I expecting too much, or is clearer skin not a part of the benefits of eating this way? I have not eliminated nightshades, and I am 100% compliant to ultimate weight loss. I'm 59 and a half years old, no caffeine for the past 3 weeks, no alcohol for 6 years. Can you give me any insights on why my skin is rebelling? Thank you so much for your wonderful knowledge. Your delivery and non-judgment is wonderful. The way you explain everything has been very enjoyable, and you are very much appreciated.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. The short answer is no. This program will unbelievably improve the quality of skin. If you look at people that have been doing this, the hydration and the the micronutrients coming in the foods we're recommending remarkably improve skin. The fact of the matter is that your grip strength is better. The inflammation in the body is somewhat better. You still got some swollen joints. It sounds like it was a very deep-rooted, almost autoimmune-like response, and it may take a lot longer. I will guarantee you that you are an absolutely perfect candidate for water-only fasting. And I think this is the next step to give that reboot and reprogram that immune system in a certain way. You've made unbelievably great changes. You've done it for a while now. You've gotten some good responses, but you're not quite where you want to be yet. And there's still something going on in that system that's manifesting through the skin. And the skin and the bowel are connected. I always like to think about the skin as an extension of the bowel. There may be stuff going on in the flora of the gut. There may be something still unresolved that way. So it may be something that has to be looked at more clinically that way. But I think participating in a water fast under good supervision would be a great interest for you.
You know, when I've been at True North for up to 5 weeks working, and I've seen people, not even overweight, but young people, just like they're, fasting for that reason. And I've seen it really work.
I mean, look at this old skin. We've talked about that.
It's beautiful, beautiful.
Beautiful.
So Honeybee has 3 questions, but they're very short ones.
Okay.
First, how to replenish potassium?
Well, the diet is loaded with potassium. Everything in it is, remember, we made the point that plants are high in potassium and low in sodium as a rule. So just eating a broad base of plants replenishes potassium. People think it's bananas. There's as much potassium, if not more, in green foods than there is even in bananas. So just eat the foods we're recommending.
Nice. And how not to lose lean muscle mass?
You got to keep it active. That's why we talked about, being physically active. You're also going to protect lean muscle mass eating the way we're recommending, because you're not putting in a lot of saturated fats and that kind of stuff. But the truth is, as we get older, we talked about the fact that there is some sarcopenia, there is some loss of muscle mass, and keeping tone by putting some resistance training is a big help to that.
Great. What is a simple way to eat the rainbow?
What is she calling the rainbow? So we're on the same page.
Maybe just the fruits and colorful fruits and vegetables, I'm
the
guessing?
Rainbow is the rainbow. We put that on your plate. When you look down, it should look like a rainbow. That's the simplest way I talk about it. I mean, the truth of the matter is you don't need to be a biochemist. All the antioxidants and micronutrients are all in the colors of fruits and vegetables. So I tell people you don't need to be a biochemist. You just need to put a rainbow on your plate. So when you're looking at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you should see a palette of color. If you don't, I mean, think about it. What's the basic color of the cuisine in most hospitals?
Brown.
White, brown, and gray. It's not happening. You don't need to be this. So the bottom line is that's what you want. You want to see that color on your plate. And what happens when you overcook fruits and vegetables? That color bleaches out. So we want them crisp. We want them lightly steamed. You don't need them overcooked and overboiled, and so that all the color is bleached out. So you want it in a way where you're still getting that color. And if you eat on color, that's also a kind of an interesting strategy.
Well, it's interesting when you think Thanksgiving is coming up and what we eat is colorful. What they eat, white turkey, brown gravy, brown stuffing, there's no color.
Right.
Okay. And she just says that thank you so much for this course. So rich in helpful, actionable content. I appreciate the privilege of learning this excellent material. And we all do, Honeybee. It's been quite a course.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yep. And God, this may be the last question, and this would be amazing. So but it's a two-parter. So okay. Doha says, my husband has been mostly plant-based for the last 3 months, and he's feeling really well. But he wants to ask Dr. Sabatino, how can he maintain his body weight without consuming nuts and seeds and high sources of fat, since he is losing weight and he doesn't want that?
Remember, when you first start a program like this, it actually happens in about 3 phases. There's going to be an initial weight loss period that's going to be significant, which is where he is. Then there'll come a point where the body will become much more efficient and it will start to stabilize at a weight. And then again, from that point, depending on what the system needs, there may be a little bit of weight gain. He's making a judgment that he has to be at a certain weight. That may not be the right judgment. I mean, his number, his magic number may not need to be where it is. But I will tell you this, that again, the way to increase that, if that is the concern, is with weight training, because when you do weight training and then you follow with a little bit more of calorie dense material, there can be some little bit of increased muscle mass and weight gain. And remember, you can have an increase in weight and look significantly leaner. And that's very important too, because we still are getting lost in numbers on the scale and all of that stuff. Just remember, you can take someone very fit at 160 pounds and someone who's not, and the person at 160 can look obese next to the person that's the same weight. So understand that the way we lean the body, the way we make the body fit, the way we train the body, all can have an impact. But for him, there's going to be a three-pronged step. He's in that stage where he's still losing weight. It will stabilize. I would recommend using some weight training and that kind of thing in his life too. And then he'll find that the weight will come up to a kind of a set point. And those of us that have been doing this a very long time, in many ways, regardless of what you do, the weight hovers pretty much around the same place. It's kind of intriguing how the body finds that set point for itself.
She goes on to say, while he is able to lose some unwanted fat throughout his body, the only area that has stubborn fat in it is his thighs. He feels they are bigger than they should, considering he has a slim body type. Will this fat ever go away?
Well, he's assuming it's fat. It may be just larger legs and muscle. I have larger legs. I've always had them that way from being an athlete in my earlier years. But the bottom line is that in this eating plan that we're recommending, it's going to take down body fat everywhere eventually. And that's just the nature of the beast.
Nice. Believe it or not, I'm going to open the chat because we're getting done. This is amazing before 6, and we only have one more question that was previously submitted. Let me see if I can open this. This is from Brianna, and she says that she gets frequent urinary tract infections after intercourse, and the nurse practitioner of her urologist prescribed something called D-mannose powder. Have you ever heard of taking that every day as a preventative measure? Does it work? I'm concerned because it's sugar and I don't eat sugar.
There are people that do that. She's got the proverbial honeymoon cystitis, we call that. Again, sometimes that has to do with the vigor and the positioning of intercourse. There's different things of that regard that can be addressed. Again, I don't know her age. Sometimes the tissues get a little more brittle as you move into perimenopause and menopause.
It says she's 58.
She's 58. Mm-hmm. So she's probably past all of that. She's probably in the early stages of menopause. And so there's going to be a more brittle nature to the epithelial lining of the urethra. And the chances are that intercourse or not, UTIs are more common for women in that stage, regardless of intercourse. So the intercourse may be adding a little bit of insult to injury. The real key to that is keeping everything with this kind of a program. I would make sure there's a lot of good preamble to sex. I would watch the vigor of it. Just try to be more relaxed with it a little bit initially to see if that makes an impact. But the bottom line is you're dealing with a physiology that could be already going through a little bit of change in the urethra that's accentuating that. When she takes the mannose, does it change it?
Well, I guess she hasn't started yet. She was concerned because it's basically sugar. It says 10 calories on the label. Will that affect her abstinence from sugar?
No, it's not really going to do that. But my feeling is I don't know how much it's really going to change that at all. My feeling is that I think that all of this is a little bit of a brittle nature to that. I would work on varying position, varying different aspects of the sexual experience, and not stopping, of course. You want to enjoy it, but I just think you got to shift things around a little bit and see if it makes a difference.
Well, you talked about the preamble to sex. You did such a great demonstration of the exercises. Maybe you could demonstrate that?
Well, that's what we call a private consultation.
Right. Okay. All right. See, so this is what happens. I open the chat and then they type a million questions. So I'm closing it again, and we'll see if we can get through these in the last few minutes.
Let's just get through whatever we get through because.
Okay. Well, but if I keep it open, they're going to keep typing. So we'll
be here till midnight.
We'll be here forever. So I'm closing it again, and we'll get through these questions hopefully.
That's fine.
Quickly.
Let's do that.
But they are watching live, so we'd like to help. Charlotte says, when is it better to eat salad, lunch, or dinner, or does it matter? I say every meal, personally. But
I say every meal. I mean, bottom line is you can have it any meal. For me, I don't like salads as much in the morning. That's just a personal preference. And I think that's just because I got into a pattern of being very connected to fruit and other things in the morning. But I know people that thrive on salads in the morning. They do amazingly well. I love my salad midday and I love salad at night. So my feeling is no, I don't think there's any set time that you need to deal with salad. Whenever the spirit moves you, jump into that salad bowl.
Yep, salad in the morning, salad in the evening, salad at supper time. Julie says, hi, thanks for such a great interview. Please, will you talk about supposed caloric restriction promoting longevity? What do they mean by that? How much restriction?
Oh, now you're talking about something I spent a lot of years with. I was on the original team in the University of Texas that did the original research on calorie restriction and aging back in the late 1980s and early 90s. It was one of the leading groups. What they discovered early on was that if you took animals, and they started out with mice and rats, and you gave them an amount of food that allowed them to run around, play, nibble, reproduce, and do all their rat-like things, and then if you calculated the calories that they were eating to do all of that, and you reduced it by 40%, you could do 30%, but 40% was even better, the animals on the reduced calories lived 50% longer. That would be like you and I adding 40 years to our lives by the simple act of calorie restriction. Now, understand that in those studies to look at calorie restriction, they can't take food. They can't just take food away because then the animals could possibly become nutrient deficient. So they're supplemented with nutrients to compensate for the decline in calorie intake. Bottom line is, that baffled and befuddled scientists for years. How could such a simple change affect longevity to such a great extent? And they discovered that there's a few hypotheses about how it happens. Those animals don't have inflammation the same way, the ones that live longer. They don't have oxidative stress. They don't have something called glycation. And intriguingly, and here's where it's interesting, is that when you eat in the way that we are recommending, without doing the calorie restriction dance that those animals did, you create all of the physiological changes that were associated with longevity just by eating what we're recommending. In fact, at an upcoming conference, I'm doing a talk called The Plant-Based Fountain of Youth. Why stop at 100? And I'm going to go into all of the ways that our eating plan mimics all of the changes in those animals that live longer without just restricting calories, just by eating plant-based. And so it's really remarkable. So all I can tell you is that you are also eating the best longevity diet when you eat the way we're recommending, as well as the best weight loss approach, which is a nice bonus.
Absolutely.
So we're throwing in a few more years along with the weight loss. It's a good deal.
Kimberly asks, will all the Q&A sessions be permanently recorded and available for those who have purchased this wonderful program? I've thoroughly enjoyed this program. Thank you, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving to both of you. Thank you, Kimberly, and absolutely, it's ready, except for this module.
Yes. And I want to make this point. When we're done with this, that this whole thing is going to be, again, available to everybody, family, friends, and anybody you know that's struggling with this problem. Please turn them on to this program. That's why I did it. I wanted to provide hope and reach as many people as I possibly could. So this is going to stay available for a very long time. So turn your family and friends onto it.
Right. So this would make excellent holiday gifts that you could buy for friends and family. Absolutely. The only difference is because they didn't get to participate in the live class, they can't ask questions, but it's still,
but they get all our Q&As. They get
absolutely. Everything. I think it's like more than 15 hours of content at this point. Yeah, and Kimberly, all the other sessions are already there. I think it takes Toby about 24 hours to get the most current session tonight in the member center, but yes, absolutely. Rosie says, I'm a diabetic and fearful of eating fruit. What would you say is a safe amount of fruit to eat on this plan? Is it okay to have fruit as a snack between meals if one gets hungry?
Well, Rosie, here's what I got to tell you. The quickest way to reverse the diabetes that you're suffering with is to do the dietary plan that we've talked about. And here's the intriguing piece. We made this point early on in the modules that the problem of insulin resistance is not because of high sugar per se. It's because of high fat that blocks the insulin's ability to react and act on muscle and liver cells to drive sugar into them. So because the sugar can't enter those cells, it starts to rise and you get high blood sugar. and your body thinks you're not making enough insulin, so it starts overproducing insulin and it beats your pancreas up in the process. And then, of course, if you eat anything that's sweet or sugary, you're going to get a high sugar response because insulin's not working and you think the problem is sugar. The problem is saturated animal fat. If you start eating the way we're recommending, with all of the greens, a small amount of fruit to start off with at the beginning, but again, no saturated fat, no animal fat and protein. In a very short while, your blood sugar levels are going to drop, your insulin function is going to improve, and you'll be able to eat volumes of fruit and have your sugar be very well maintained. There are people right now with diabetes eating 30 and 40 pieces of fruit a day without their sugar level being a problem. So you have been sold the wrong idea. And I feel bad about this because groups like the American Diabetic Association have been telling diabetics for decades to eat diets high in animal protein and fat and avoid all the plants that are carbohydrate, when in fact that was the solution to the problem. When people come into our centers and they start eating our non-SOS, low calorie dense foods, low in fat, no animal fat, we see drops in blood sugar 50, 100 plus points within a week. And so we see a tremendous return on your investment with this approach. We see a tremendous recovery, and you've been sold the wrong information. But in the meantime, right now, your system is unstable. So start adding fruit slowly but surely. And I would recommend with your fruit, make it a lot of berries at first and use things like romaine lettuce, celery, and cucumber along with it. It'll temper some of that absorption initially, and you'll be able to start adding more and more fresh fruit and carbohydrate food like we're recommending, and you will solve this problem.
Great. So there's 3 more questions. Judy says, if for whatever reason I occasionally get as little as 4 hours of sleep, should I not do my normal exercise routine the next morning? That would include walking 2 miles, aerobics, light weights, and floor work.
I think it's going to depend on where your energy is at. If you're feeling fatigued and all of that, I would allow myself to probably rest a little bit somehow or give it a little bit of a break before I went out and did vigorous, heavy activity. I know sometimes for me, if I am where I've had a little disturbance of sleep and I do a more modest or moderate walk, sometimes I do get a little bit of a burst of energy and I'm feeling good from that. But you got to walk a fine line because the truth is you can just exhaust the system, and that's something you don't really want to do.
Great. Karen says, my blood sugar ranges between 102 and 128 for the last 3 months of being vegan. What if it doesn't go below 100 over the next 3 months of staying on this program? How does someone know if they're a candidate for a health center like yours or True North?
Well, the other thing about blood sugar is you don't want to just measure blood sugar itself. You want to measure something called hemoglobin A1C, because the body puts sugar in the hemoglobin molecule over a period of time. When I stick a needle in your arm to do a blood test, I'm only measuring your sugar right in that moment. We're not seeing what the real full picture is across time. So when you do that measurement and you add it to the hemoglobin A1C, you'll get a chance to see if that elevated sugar that you're recommending, that low level of elevation, is translating into this hemoglobin molecule. If it is, then it's indicative of something a little bit more of a problem with glucose metabolism and probably insulin resistance. But I contend that if you continue to stay with what we're talking about, that should really move on down. And I think we should be able to resolve that.
Great. Where's this going? Gretchen says, can you discuss what the treatment is for reward deficiency syndrome?
The treatment is, we talked about it on a psychological level. You've got to get in touch with the things that are motivating that addictive behavior and understand your relationship to why you're using those things in your life. But there's actually a several-pronged approach where there are sometimes certain treatments that we do with chiropractic care. There's a supplement program that we do with supplementation. But those are just modalities that stabilize the use of whatever substance or behavior you've been doing. You've got to do that work that we've talked about psychologically, in my opinion, that brings you into balance in your life to understand what those things mean to you and where they play, what role they play in your ability to function and perform in your life. So there are supportive modalities with supplementation, with body work, things of that nature But again, they're only to help you stabilize the pattern of use. You've still got to do the work that involves the psychological, emotional, and other components that find the, get in better balance and relationship to what those mean in your life. And
Nice.
I'm not going into the deep program because it needs to be evaluated and so on. And again, we could talk about that in a more personal way clinically. I just don't want to send that out there and then you start taking supplements and trying to do all of it. And it's not the way we want to do that. But there are approaches that people do in the addictive field with nutritional supplementation and other modalities that help stabilize use and bring that person back to a better state of reward.
Jane asked, do the salt substitutes lead to any problems? I really struggle to give up salt.
I think if you're using Benson's and things like that, I don't see that being a problem. And I think, to be honest with you, if you start really using a lot of supportive herbs and spices and things of that nature, that works. It takes care of all of that. I mean, if I put basil and I put some oregano and I add parsley and, these kinds of things in the food that I'm using, those tastes really make it work without having to add a lot of salt. And I think it's just a question of getting salt-free and allowing yourself to experience the bounty that nature provides with all the different tastes. And I think you'll be fine. But the salt substitutes, again, they can be used. I just wouldn't start using bottles of them, but you don't need to. A little bit goes a long way.
Absolutely. Julie says, can you please talk about how white rice can affect the brain of someone with food addiction?
Well, because whenever you're eating these refined sugars, you're going to have these rapid absorptions from bloodstream. One of the beautiful parts, first of all, the food, if it's a white rice that's been processed, there are white rices that grow as white rices. There are white basmati, there's things of that nature that are a little bit more of those species. But if you're getting a refined rice, you got to realize that you're taking away a lot of the nutrients from the outer core of that, the outer husk and things of that plant. So you're not getting the nutrient value. So now you're getting a very compromised food that is going to cause more, that'll probably be absorbed more rapidly. You get shifts in blood sugar up and down. You're not getting the nutrient value. They become a little bit more empty kind of calories because you're not getting nutritional satisfaction. And it may leave the brain somewhat unsatisfied. The key to that is if you're going to have some white rice, once again, have it with a huge amount of vegetable material. That's the bottom line. At least complemented with all the things that are going to provide value. But if you're just sitting down eating bowls of white rice without the foods we're recommending, it's not going to work for your body or your brain.
That is great. Well, I closed the chat again because every time I open it, it's like, whew. So do you have any?
We're already like 5 after 9.
Right. So we're going to say goodbye, but do you have any closing thoughts on anything?
No, my closing thoughts is to be kind and loving with yourself and, take it one day at a time. Depending on where you are in your life, these choices may be more extreme for where you are, or they may be something that's consistent with what you've been trying to do more recently. But whatever you can do, just stay the course. There's going to be ups and downs. Life is not a straight stairway to heaven. It's kind of a pattern, more of a waveform. So there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows. And, when you hit those points where maybe you're not seeing the weight loss drop the way you would like it to be, or you're seeing some of that and you're getting frustrated, just hold the course. Pay attention to other aspects of life. Live your life. Laugh, love, do the things that are part of life. Try not to get so self-absorbed and focused on just that, those numbers on the scale and the weight loss issue itself, but keep working in the direction of embracing the foods that we're recommending, because they're not only for weight loss in particular, they're for health in general. They're going to affect you on every level. And we've given you tools now to see this in a much bigger picture, in a way that can create the body image you would love to have without mortgaging your health future, having high level health, so that you can just kind of eat plants and get on with it, get on with the things that you want to accomplish and do in your life. So enjoy it, have fun with it. But I will tell you that these tools will be very valuable strategies and skills that will help you stay the course and create that body image you would love to have across time.
And end dieting forever.
And end dieting forever.
Absolutely.
Stay lean for life. That's the title of our thing, and you will. And I love you all, and thank you for staying with me through all of these modules. I've loved it. I want to thank AJ, too, for helping to facilitate this opportunity. And it's just been great, and I hope that we can meet each other down the road.
Thank you so much, Dr. Frank, and thank you all for being here.
And happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving. Bye, everyone.